face to face. President Trump and Pope Francis meet at the Vatican.
And it was an honor to be with the Pope.
The two leaders find common ground on world peace and life issues. We'll take you from Rome to the White House to Capitol Hill.
It says a whole lot about the unique alignment of the Holy See in the United States.
A former U.S. ambassador to the Holy See gives us his take. School choice funding. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos on Capitol Hill touting the president's budget proposal. And Vatican protocol. Melania and Ivanka Trump observe Catholic customs during today's papal meeting. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 24th, 2017. President Trump calls it the honor of a lifetime. Tonight, we bring you comprehensive coverage of his first ever meeting with Pope Francis. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump and Pope Francis have different styles, but today they struck a tone of peace and goodwill. Susie Pinto begins our team coverage of the president's first foreign trip. She joins us from Rome. Susie.
Lauren, it has been a big day here in the Vatican. President Trump is midway through a 9-day international tour. This morning, the Holy Father welcomed the president in the Vatican. It was a much anticipated first encounter after a few clashes, but today both leaders highlighted common ground, including the need for peace in the world today. President Donald Trump arrives in the Vatican.
Welcome to the Vatican. It's an honor, a great pleasure to receive you here in the home.
The ancient protocol of the church on full display.
Mr. President.
The visit began with a handshake and then a picture. The president thanking the Holy Father.
Thank you very much. This is such a great honor.
After a private meeting that lasted 30 minutes, President Trump introduced the First Lady, and they shared a light moment. The Holy Father asking Melania about a favorite Slovenian dessert of his. And then she asks him to bless her rosary. As is tradition, the Pope and the President exchange gifts, Trump giving Francis a first edition set of Martin Luther King's works, as well as a bronze sculpture. The Holy Father presented the U.S. leader with a medal representing peace and 3 documents that to some degree define his papacy and priorities, including the family and the environment. The Pope telling the president he hopes Trump can be an instrument of peace, and then a promise. President Trump telling the Holy Father, "I won't forget what you said." Lauren, we don't know what Pope Francis said to President Trump today during their private meeting, but the Vatican released a statement expressing satisfaction on the common commitment to life, the freedom of worship, and conscience rights. The Holy See also said it hopes that the Vatican and the Church in the United States can work with the U.S. government on the issues of health care, education, and helping immigrants. Lauren?
Susie, and one of the things we are going to be talking about later in the show is other ways, including Christian persecution, where the two groups can work together. There has been so much buildup to this first encounter. Can you give us a little window into what the president's reaction was to meeting Pope Francis?
Lauren, President Trump seemed quite happy after this meeting. He called it fantastic. He later said it was the honor of a lifetime, and he said he left the Vatican today more determined than ever to seek peace in the world.
That's just incredible. He's been on an amazing journey. I understand, though, after this, the president and his delegation were able to see some of the cultural heritage of the Vatican?
That's right. After their meeting with Pope Francis, they went to the Sistine Chapel, which, of course, is the site of Michelangelo's famous fresco, The Last Judgment. Melania and President Trump gazed at that beautiful piece of art, and then they went downstairs to St. Peter's Basilica, where they saw another masterpiece by Michelangelo, the Pietà, the famous statue of Our Lady with Jesus in her arms. And then they made one final stop to the tomb of St. John Paul II, who, of course, is so famous and made such an impact on the world.
Really incredible that he was able to see all of those sites. What's next for the president?
Well, this afternoon, President Trump left Rome and he arrived in Brussels ahead of a meeting with NATO leaders. That's just the 4th stop out of 5 stops on this international tour. The final and 5th stop will be in Sicily, where President Trump will be meeting with leaders of the G7 nations.
That's wonderful. Susie, thank you so much for all of your reports from Rome. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly executive producer.
Thank you, Lauren.
The U.S. ambassador to the Holy See consults with the Vatican on international issues of common interest. Florida Congressman Francis Rooney, a former ambassador to the Holy See during the George W. Bush administration, joins us now. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back on.
Based on your experience as ambassador to the Holy See, how important was this meeting to set the tone between the Vatican and the White House?
I think this meeting is very important, and the fact that President Trump chose to come to the Holy See both early in his term and right after going to Saudi Arabia and Israel says a whole lot about the unique alignment of the Holy See and the United States to promote shared values.
You know, President Reagan created a divine plan, as they called it, to end communism and worked with Pope John Paul II to implement it. It seems to me, based on what you just said, that President Trump is reaching out to Pope Francis, but this time, instead of battling communism, they're talking about battling ISIS. Do you think that Trump is mimicking Reagan's strategy?
Well, in a sense, I think he's following Reagan's strategy and following the roadmap laid out by Pope Benedict back after the Regensburg speech of working to use the Holy See's unique soft power diplomacy to seek to bring Islam into the modern world and to use all interreligious dialogue and all faiths to support Islam as it reforms itself.
You know, Donald Trump also has been a very vocal pro-life president, and those are a lot of the people who helped him get elected. And so while there are areas where President Trump also disagree with Pope Francis on immigration and climate change, it seems like the life issue from conception to natural death, also Christian persecution, are fundamental issues they have in common. Do you think that's enough to build a strong relationship?
Oh, I absolutely do. And I think the Pope himself said a couple of important things. He said, I'm not going to judge President Trump. And he said, we need to focus on the common things that we have together to work on and go forward. And I think what you say about Christian persecution, which has reached an all-time heinous level, the opportunity to work on the reform of Islam and uniting to fight Islamic terrorism, as well as to fight the scourge of trafficking, are things that we can work on together with the Holy See.
He nominated Callista Gingrich just on Friday as ambassador to the Holy See, right before he took off for this trip. I need to know from you, what is going to be the toughest thing that she has to do?
Well, I think, first of all, she's a terrific pick because she has a strong pipeline directly into the White House. And that was what made me effective, and some of the previous ambassadors of the Holy See who could go straight to the White House and get support for what they were trying to accomplish. I think one of the things that she's going to need to work on are the things that are laid out in this communique, are interreligious dialogue to help reform Islam and to help fight Islamic terrorism, as well as to seek to end the persecution of Christians.
Thank you so much for your time. Florida Congressman Francis Rooney, a former ambassador to the Holy See.
Thank you and have a great day.
Now, for the White House, the trip has, for the most part, quieted the president's detractors, some of whom had been calling for his impeachment over his ties to Russia just days before he left. Correspondent Mark Irons is at the White House with more. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump's first foreign trip is being hailed as a success by friends and even some political foes, as he's left domestic crises behind. The trip was built around the theme of speaking to 3 of the world's biggest religions.
This is a battle between barbaric criminals who seek to obliterate human life and decent people, all in the name of religion.
Religion, the key focus of the first half of the president's trip. Speaking in Saudi Arabia, he lashed out against ISIS and Islamist extremism. But his trip has also had calmer moments, reflection at Jerusalem's Western Wall, and reverence while touring the Vatican. Gary Schmidt of the American Enterprise Institute says that the focus on religion and fighting terrorism has distracted from controversy at home.
These trips really matter to bolster a president's appearance as president. Obviously, President Trump had a really tough week before he left on the trip. It seemed like he couldn't get out of his own way.
Nigel Gardner with the Heritage Foundation says the symbolism of the trip has deeper meaning.
This is about building, strengthening the international coalition against Iran. I think that the Iranian nuclear threat looms large against the background of this trip.
Now in Brussels, Trump is expected to rebuke NATO allies for not meeting their target of spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson reaffirmed this as the main goal for the president, saying he really wants participating NATO members to step up and fully meet their obligations. I think you can expect the president to be very tough on them. The next days have the potential of being more contentious as skeptical allies await the president's trip to NATO tomorrow. Lauren?
Thank you, Mark Irons at the White House. Religious freedom advocates gather in the nation's capital today, trying to reverse a dangerous trend. A new study shows government harassment against religious groups around the world is surging. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby joins us from Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are mapping out their next steps. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Laura. Nearly everyone agrees that the United States can help promote religious freedom around the world. The question is how? Longtime religious freedom advocate Dr. Robert George tells us many policies need to change, but there's one that stands out.
The best thing we can do to promote religious freedom abroad is to honor religious freedom at home. We need to clean up our own house. We need to make sure that we are in the vanguard of respecting the rights of our own citizens, the basic conscience rights of people of all faiths and all shades of belief. So that's number one.
In addition, he says one of the key things the United States needs to do is put more pressure on governments that restrict religious freedom. Some of those include our own allies like Pakistan. George was one of a number of panelists talking with lawmakers today about what U.S. policies are working and what the U.S. can do to better promote religious freedom. All of this is in light of a new study by the Pew Research Center, which shows government restrictions and hostility toward religion are on the rise. In 2015, 40% of countries had high or very high religious restrictions. That's an increase of 6% from the year before. The report shows more mob violence and assaults are on the rise and more people are displaced due to their faith, especially in Europe.
Some of this is related to immigration from the Middle East, in particular rising numbers of Muslims and some actions by Muslims themselves. The refugee crisis in Europe is part of what is driving up religious hostilities in Europe, and government restrictions are at least partly a response to that.
Alan Cooperman, the director of religion research with Pew, says it's too soon to know the 2016 numbers, but government restrictions on religion continue to be a trend. Dr. George says it's important that the United States continue to advocate for religious freedom around the world. He says the U.S. as a superpower can hold other governments accountable and make sure that they are treating people of faith with respect. Lauren?
Wyatt, did Dr. George weigh in on how well the Trump administration is promoting religious freedom?
Yes, Lauren, he did. He did say that the Trump administration can do a lot more to advocate for religious freedom. He says that the recent executive order that the president signed doesn't actually go far enough to protect conscience rights. However, he does say that the Trump administration has been better on religious freedom issues than the Obama administration. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsby reporting. Thank you, Wyatt. The leading Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee says the panel will issue subpoenas against embattled former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The retired general has denied a request for documents from House Russia investigators and refused to respond to a subpoena from the heads of the Senate Russia investigation. His lawyer says Flynn will invoke his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. Flynn has become a target of probes being conducted in the House, Senate, and the FBI. At least 5 people are now in custody in connection with the Ariana Grande concert bombing in Manchester. The arrests, including the alleged bomber's brothers and father, come as the UK is on its highest threat level. Prime Minister Theresa May warns there could be another attack. Up to 3,800 military troops are being deployed to British streets to guard key locations.
This frees up armed police officers to then give the police service capacity to deploy them to places like Manchester as part of our plans for keeping the country safe.
At least 22 people were killed and more than 60 others hurt when a bomb exploded at that concert on Monday night. Pop star Ariana Grande has canceled her world tour through June 5th. A group connected to ISIS attacks a southern Filipino town, beheading a police chief, burning buildings, and kidnapping a Catholic priest. The attack happened in Marawi City. The local bishop says militants forced their way into the cathedral, took the priest, 10 worshipers, and 3 church workers. The country's president, Rodrigo Duterte, has declared martial law across the region and could expand it nationwide. Heavy fighting inside the safe zone in southern Syria. Government forces battling insurgents have carried out a series of airstrikes in the town of Dara. This week's clashes are among the worst violations of the de-escalation agreement. The Trump administration is extending a humanitarian program that allows 58,000 people from Haiti to live in the United States, for now. Temporary protected status was given to Haitians living in the U.S. after a 2010 earthquake devastated parts of that country. Those Haitians can live and work in the U.S. without fear of deportation, at least through January, when the new extension expires. U.S. bishops are welcoming the Trump administration's extension. Our partners have their statement. You can read it right now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Coming up, school funding battle. Public school advocates cry foul, while Catholic schools praise the president's budget. White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney tells lawmakers President Trump's plan to cut social programs is designed to increase economic growth and put taxpayers first.
We are not going to kick any deserving person off of any meaningful program. We want to help people just as much as you do. Republicans care about poor people as much as Democrats, just the same as we care about clean air and healthy drinking water.
Mulvaney was among several members of the president's cabinet who traveled to Capitol Hill today to promote Trump's budget proposal. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was one of them. She says the Trump administration is proposing the most ambitious expansion of school choice in American history. Yet today, one day after the administration's 2018 budget was delivered to Capitol Hill, Democrats are on the attack. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The 2018 budget would slash the overall education department's funding by $9 billion, but it pumps $1 billion into school choice options that allow students to pick which school they want to attend.
Betsy DeVos pushed school choice for decades as a Republican political activist. Now, as education secretary, she's trying to make it part of the federal government's education policy.
If we truly want to provide better education to underserved communities, then we must start with giving parents and students the power to select high-quality schools that meet their needs.
The president's 2018 budget calls for $250 million to help set up scholarships for low-income families to attend private schools, and $167 million to help start and expand charter schools. That does fall short of the president's campaign words to launch $20 billion into school choice, a topic he's brought up again as president.
These families should be free to choose the public, private, charter, magnet, religious, or homeschool that is right for them.
Today, Democrats give the president's education budget a failing grade.
You can't do more with less. You do less with less. And we certainly should not be siphoning off taxpayer dollars to pay for vouchers.
Study after study shows these vouchers go to families who would likely send their kids to private school anyway.
While Republicans say the time to expand vouchers is now.
When you create competition among schools, you actually elevate everyone's education level, and that's what we need in this country.
Pro-charter school group Stand for Children is slamming the proposal for sending tax money to private schools while cutting after-school programs, arts education, teacher training, and college work-study programs.
Jason, what is the White House's reason for making those cuts to education?
Secretary DeVos says it fulfills the president's promise to take power from the federal government and return it back to the states. One of the budget's 8 pillars of reform is education, which includes school choice.
Correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Up next, the First Lady and Ivanka Trump in the spotlight, who they met with today besides Pope Francis. And the history of papal visits. Wall Street Journal reporter Francis Roca joins us. The First Lady and Ivanka Trump both take part in their own events while traveling overseas with the president. Melania Trump stopped by the Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital after meeting Pope Francis. The First Lady painted pictures with patients and took selfies with them. She ended the visit by praying in the hospital chapel. Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, met with a group of human trafficking victims. She also commended a Catholic humanitarian organization that serves the poor, the elderly, and migrants.
The work you do resonates strongly, not just here in Rome, but throughout the world. We talked about the many different programs that have been successfully launched and have developed over many, many years now.
Many people have been following both the First Lady's and the First Daughter's wardrobe choices. Both of them wore black veils on their heads to greet the Pope per Vatican protocol. Earlier in the week, the First Lady did not wear the customary headscarf during their stop in Saudi Arabia. Today's meeting with the Pope continues a relationship built over several presidential administrations. Joining us now is Frank Rocca, Vatican correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, you have covered the Vatican for a decade, including several visits by U.S. presidents. How does this one compare?
Well, I think, you know, no president gets out of here without being both praised and criticized. With George W. Bush, the issue was the Iraq War and all the complications that ensued from that. With President Obama, there was abortion, embryonic stem cell research, religious liberty issues. And with President Trump, we all know that, on migration especially, the Pope and the President don't agree. But I think, the Pope, the Vatican, in their communique, surprisingly to some, recognized that with the administration on life issues, abortion evidently, and on religious rights of conscience, that they're on the same page. And so I would say that it was just as favorable as any of the other visits, perhaps slightly more so than President Obama's visits.
Do you believe that the visit was a success for both sides? Is it possible for something to be a success?
Certainly, I think so. I mean, I think for the Pope, it was certainly, he showed magnanimity. He showed his willingness to listen, even to someone with whom he clearly disagrees on a lot of issues. And certainly the president paid tribute to the Pope, to coming out of his way. I mean, on this trip, this long and very busy trip, he came to Rome only to see the Pope. And then the president walks away with very friendly, positive images with the Pope and with the First Lady. This was another good day for President Trump.
Although I would have to say that there was one picture that's blowing up the Twitterverse, as they say, where the Pope, as I'm quoting here, looks grumpy. So I think that people really do want to find the odd man pictures as opposed to the common ground that they can sow.
Well, first of all, the Pope has been pretty tired the last few days. Anybody who's seen him up close has noted that. And also the people on the plane who were traveling with President Trump said the same about him. But I think also, two people who meet for the first time and they're asked to pose standing side by side, it's an awkward moment. It's very difficult. And also the Pope often looks that way. He often looks very, very serious.
Yes,
and you can pick your images, but on many occasions he was chuckling and smiling, and especially after they talked. So that's a good sign. If he's in a better mood after the conversation, then I would prefer that than vice versa.
Right, I'm with you 100%. We will be reading your reports in the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much, Frank Rocca, Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
And that does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn, and I'll see you again tomorrow. We leave you with more images of the President's visit to the Vatican. Good night, and God bless.